So we're here today to break ground, to explore the future of our food, of our farming, and I guess we all here are already pretty well informed. We follow the news where we also hear about world hunger and there not being enough food in the world to feed everybody, resources not being distributed fairly. And while we listen to all this, we probably sit at home over our full dinner plates and yeah, we choose our food wisely. We buy at farmers markets, maybe. We try not to waste any food. But then still there are the times, or at least this is what happens to me, where I find myself, where I do shop big box organic, or even worse and probably more realistic, where I stand at the counter of a big supermarket and I compare prices and all the big problems, world hunger, the milk crisis, global justice, they seem so far away. What difference can I now possibly make being just one person? Does what I eat really matter? And I was discussing this with some friends of mine for quite a while. We were wondering, where's the link between the big food and farming politics and our personal everyday dinner plates? Where's the gap? And this is what we came up with. It's 2,000 square meters. So here's what we did. We took all arable land on Earth, which is 1.4 billion hectares, and we divided that amount by the number of people on Earth. We currently are around 7 billion people on Earth. So when you do the math, each one of us gets round about 2,000 square meters of arable land. That's your fair share of global land and food. Now, how big is this and can this feed one person? This is what we were wondering. So we sub-rented a piece of farmland here in Berlin from an organic farmer, and we laid out our 2,000 square meters. Now, before we could get started, we had to do some research, and I quickly would like to share some data with you. This is the global field. This is what 2,000 square meters of arable land would look like if all crops on it were planted in the same percentage as they are grown globally. Now, you don't have to read the writing below. I'm just going to talk you through it. We have 1/3 almost for cereal, then also large amounts for soy and corn, oilseed, also some cotton. Your jeans also have to grow on your 2,000 square meters. And then in the back, there's this tiny little spot, just around 80 square meters, 80 of 2,000 for vegetables. So nobody eats that much cereal. It's mostly grown to feed animals. It namely takes exactly a field the size of 2,000 square meters to feed 2 pigs. So if you are a meat eater and if you are okay with just eating pig meat for an entire year and nothing else, you'd be fine. So nobody wants to do that. So what else could you grow on 2,000 square meters and how much of it? We found you could grow 8,500 kilograms of potatoes or 7,000 kilograms of cabbage, also 15,000 kilograms of tomatoes. So who's supposed to eat all that food? Of course, the answer lies in a good mixture of things and certainly also good farm management, because the crucial fact is that on its way from our fields to our plates, 1/3 of our food gets thrown away, which is painful to learn, knowing that there are people suffering from hunger and malnutrition in the world, and we throw out 1/3 of our food. What's more is that here in the European Union, we actually have a bit more than 2,000 square meters per resident of arable land. And our soils are very fertile. We have great air and water conditions. Also, not to mention our technical and financial means. And still, we cannot meet ends with this area. My friends and I, we compared the imports and the exports in the EU, and we found a deficit of 700 square meters per resident, meaning that statistically, each one of us here is using 700 square meters on top of our fair share. The EU mostly imports animal feed, especially soy, from South and North America, also Asia. And you have to consider that since the amount of arable land does not expand, someone will be missing out on the square meters we here are using in excess. So it brings us back to the question, how many square meters do I actually spend? And are 2,000 square meters enough to feed one person? So back to our field in Berlin. Now, before I tell you how our experiment went here in Berlin, I would like to know from you, what do you think? Is it possible to just live from what you harvest on 2,000 square meters? Who thinks yes? Could you please raise your hand? All right, that's a lot. That's a lot. Who thinks no, not possible? Anybody? No? Okay. How many of you are farmers? Are there any farmers here today? Okay, one farmer. All right. So, can you feed one person with what you harvest on 2,000 square meters? No, you cannot. This is us now, right? This is a bunch of city girls and boys, some office people trying to get into agriculture now. So, we were watching some tutorials on YouTube. It seemed very easy and doable. The first year on the field, it was a disaster. It rained too much, then no rain for weeks. Some crops did not grow at all. Others grew super big and super fast, especially the weeds, taking everything underneath them away. The first lesson we had to learn, it takes a real badass to be a farmer. It made us so humble to see how much it takes to manage a field. So we had a great time though. Many people came. We made a lot of new friends. Many volunteers joined. So for the next year, we had 2 young farmers join us and we became a bit more professional. Still with the question, can 2,000 square meters feed one person? So we started all over, and this year, yes, so much food. 2,000 square meters, it's crazy how much food we were harvesting. We were actually facing a different problem now. No way was one person gonna eat all this food. So we started to set up dinner parties, brunches, all sorts of events on the field, also in town, just to somehow distribute all this food we were harvesting. It's so much food. We're still planning a big Thanksgiving dinner just to do something good with all this food we're harvesting. So that's actually great news, considering that we are becoming more and more people on Earth, and yet the amount of arable land does not expand. So in the future, each one of us will have to deal with a smaller share of arable land. But this is Berlin now. Many crops don't grow here. And we were starting to wonder, what do 2,000 square meters of arable land look like in other parts of the world? So we went out. I went to China, where I was working with a local organization there, and one day they took me on a work trip to a very, very small village where I met three ladies. Each of them owns a bit more than 600 square meters of arable land. And guess what? Not only does it feed themselves, but also it provides the food for their families, and they get to sell some leftovers on a farmer's market. So we had this idea of them all three together, then they have around 2,000 square meters, sharing their stories, their photos with our 2,000 square meter community. The organization I was working with is helping us, so we here get a little insight on what 2,000 square meters of arable land look like in China. Then back in Berlin, I met a young farmer from Sweden, and she told me that nearby Stockholm, she is running a 2,000 square meter piece of land, which also feeds herself and the people she's working with there. And this is Sweden now, so lots of snow, not much sun, and still more than enough food for one person. So this is Istanbul in Turkey, our newest family member, where friends of ours are running an urban gardening project, and one of their plots in the city center actually also has just exactly the size of 2,000 square meters. So this fall they're starting with their version of 2,000 square meters. So we're curious what that will look like. And in Edinburgh, Scotland, we connected with a elementary school which has a school garden the size of 2,000 square meters. So their field serves for their lunch, which they harvest and eat together in school. And it's really cool to see how this idea spreads, how people come up with different ideas within this 2,000 square meter framework. So if you're interested now and you want to start your own field, get in touch with us. It's fascinating stuff. So where do we stand? Back to our Berlin field. There is enough food for everybody in this world. Agriculture has gotten out of control, but there is a way to fix it. What we found here in Berlin is that people easily connect once they get to meet their share of land. It does something with people. What you eat does matter. Every meal we eat, every grocery shopping we make is a message to our farmers on what kind of agriculture we want. So if you're interested how it's all connected and you want to find out how many square meters do you actually spend, how many square meters did you have for breakfast this morning, I invite you, come visit us on our field in Berlin and get to know your 2,000 square meters. Thank you.